Welcome back to the Attaching to God podcast, produced by Embodied Faith, hosted by Jeff and Sid Holsclaw. Today we are talking with Lisa Cuss, who is a licensed therapist, a speaker, and a trainer who is passionate about the intersection of psychology and faith. In her private practice, Lisa uses trauma and attachment-informed modalities to help people journey through their deep pain and places of being stuck into a place of health with themselves, others, and God. And Lisa also partners with her husband, which is, we love that when husbands and wives and husbands partner. But she works with Steve Cuss within their organization called Capable Life, which seeks to help find or help people find relief from chronic anxiety and deepening connections with God. Lisa, thank you so much for being on with us today.
Oh, I really appreciate the work you guys do. So I'm honored. I'm honored to have a conversation for sure.
Yeah, we knew about Steve's work, and we had him on the podcast just a little bit ago. And he's like, "You really should talk to my wife about all this stuff." And we're like, "Let's make it happen." So, so here we go. So, how
Yeah.
did you get into becoming a therapist? That wasn't your primary occupation, is that right? Is this
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, I originally was a teacher. So I taught school, elementary classroom for 12 years, kind of sprinkled through having children, some years staying at home. So I did that first, loved it. My last 6 years of teaching, I was working with homeschooling organizations. And so they would come in and set up shop and then teach, funny, it was the opposite of church planting, right? Where churches are in schools. So this school would meet in churches, and then we'd come in and set up school for a day or three to help out and partner with homeschooling families.
I was
And I,
one of those homeschooling families that was meeting in a church. So thank
yes,
you. Thank
yes.
you for doing
Oh,
that.
oh my gosh. And I think through that, right? Like my hat went off to the parents that were homeschooling
mm,
and all the
mm,
different hats you wear when you're doing that. And so I was one of those weird teachers. I loved parent teacher conferences because you really get to know the system and get to know the fears that the whole family holds. I spent more of my time in that job dealing with anxiety in kids and would like pull out kids and really spend time on how we can navigate it and push through it, and realized I like that a whole lot more than I did the content that I was teaching.
Mm.
mm,
So that
mhm.
was one factor. And then also, I'm a pastor's kid myself. I grew up in Ohio, small town, which had, I mean, even I feel emotional as I talk about my home, like so many perks, the beauty. I cannot remember a time that I didn't know God.
Mm.
Um, and also, man, I figured out how to people please really well, you
Oh,
know?
yeah. Yeah.
And so you take that and you fast forward into being a pastor's wife. And I think, as Andy Colbert would say, like, I lived a life that was white knuckling it, trying to be enough, not clear on what was God's and what was mine, for sure. And so that became an issue within me. And then the local church in Colorado that we had moved to in the first 6 years, um, 4 young men in our conversation, young dads, died.
Mm.
Oh
And when
no.
you're in a small congregation of like,
Mm,
I think it was like 159 people, it takes a big toll.
Yeah.
And when
wow.
you sit with families and kids, when they hear that their dad won't come home, um, something shifts in you. Like, what does it look like to sit in grief? What does it look
Yeah.
like? How do you walk in this? So it's those three things for me. Like, what's going on in me? I was armored up in a lot of ways. How do I sit
Mm.
with people? Um, and yeah, just an interest in families and anxiety held that caused me to go back to school.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious how you came to label it as anxiety. Like I think anxiety is something we talk about now more openly. But this sounds like it was at least a couple years ago when that wasn't necessarily common language. So like, can you talk a little bit about the kinds of anxiety that you were like? I think people think of anxiety as in like, oh, I'm feeling anxious and like I'm a little jittery or I'm a little panicky about something. But anxiety shows up in so many ways. I'm wondering how you came to name it all as anxiety and see that as a common thread.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a difference, right, between chronic anxiety that's contagious, where it's
Mhm.
more like reactivity in us and being armored up because we have strategies to get through life and we think we need to be a certain way or we think we need things in order to be okay. So we've got that chronic anxiety. And then you've got kind of an anxious stance that can come from, your attachment and your family of origin, or you've got an anxious stance that can come from an event or a trauma that is stuck in your body. And so it just becomes like a defense. And then you've got, generalized anxiety disorder that is really like focused on keeps spinning on fears
Yeah.
and also might be a misfiring in the brain. Um,
Mhm.
but until we know which is which, what is common is a sense of reactivity, and a sense of of an embodied feeling that we have in us that can keep us from connecting or producing or really in some ways just feeling alive and being okay.
Mm,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. So then out of that sort of noticing that anxiety that you were seeing in your church and in your school and in the family systems, what I mean, what led you to attachment in your training as a therapist?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. Um, what's true for me is that um, I realized that I had some work to do that was part of me going back to school. I think in my head, it was really, what can I do for others? And then I think it's pain, more pain, right? That brings me to attachment. So it was about 10 years ago, and I'd already, was already in the therapy job and in that role. And I was more layers of just wounding and realizing some things about myself. I went back to my therapist and I walked in and I said, "Hey, I can speed this up, right? Goals, I've got it for us, right? Our goal is that I need a new personality. That's the goal because the one that I have right now, it ain't cutting it. And I am really tired of it.
Mm,
And of course, tongue in cheek, she's like, "Well, let's talk about this. And what is it that you wish you could do that you're not doing with your personality?" And I'm like, I'm so tired of people pleasing and not saying the things that I want to say out of
Mhm.
fear of what it would do to others. Like, I really, honestly, I want to be able to get mad, you know?
Mhm.
yeah.
I want to be able to say the things that I need to say and know that repair can be there.
Mm,
Mhm.
I want to be bolder and not feel like I have to be held back. And of course, she then is, well, tell me about, she's the one that led me through internal family systems
okay.
Mhm.
into who are you really? And what are those parts of you that are taking over? And if we could hear their stories and if they could step to the side, then who really are you with God in the driver's seat of your life?
Mm,
And it was powerful for me because the reality is there's a boldness there, there's a playfulness there, there's a strength that can allow me to care, but not have to carry
yeah.
everything as if I alone am carrying.
Mm,
And so with that, just became what does it look like um, to securely or secure enough, as I call it, attach um, to myself, to God, to some people around me. And that means like comfort, but that also means strength. That
yeah.
both are true in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I just as you're saying, like, I'm tired of being
Mhm.
me, and I'm tired of what my personality costs me. It just brings to
Yes.
my mind the language that Jeff and I use about, the jungle of anxiety as being one of the attachment strategies we develop of this sense of hypervigilance always paying
Yes.
such close attention to the people around us, making sure everybody's okay, we're not hurting or bothering anybody, and then
Yeah.
doing whatever we need to do. It's like we're always paying the cost to sort of maintain connection. And like,
Yes.
Todd Hall, I'm doing a course with him, and he said the other day, like, we want connection so desperately that we will sever parts of ourselves in order to maintain pseudo connection. Of like, I can't have authentic and genuine connection with you, so I'll do what I'll take what I can get. But taking what I can get means I have to push parts of myself away or sever parts of myself, which
Mm.
then I love that you're doing this work of internal family systems and sort of bringing those parts back into the conversation as a part of the process of securing attachment. That's just,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, completely. I think what I so like about what you're saying is when we can notice what we've severed, and
Mm,
really the motive is good.
yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
motive in all of these, like the ways, our strategies, the ways we armor up, the ways we protect, at one point, were so helpful in us being able to
Mm-hmm.
survive and in some ways thrive,
Right.
And it's like grateful for that and so good. And now, you know, and now that we have
Yeah.
other resources that we can tap into. And when we can be aware of a God who has strength and who holds all, you know, and who can give what we need, and sometimes, and many times through his people,
Mhm.
then we can look at the things that we are tending to sever or look at those strategies that we're leaning way too much into, or ways that
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to be God. Um, and can allow ourselves to become more human and let
Yeah.
him be God.
Yeah.
And it's so much more connecting.
Yeah. Isn't it's
Well,
Steve who always says you get to be human, right? Yeah.
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 And that, in his words, and even as we figured out our own dance in marriage and permission to be human, it's been so healing.
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, um, thank you for just taking that journey with us.
Mhm.
I'm really curious, like as a person of faith, follower of Jesus, but then you're also trained in, what is called like attachment-based therapy or approaches. Like for you, what does attaching to God look or feel like? Like how would you
Yeah.
put words around that?
Yeah. I think Kurt Thompson, when he said the words, we all enter this world looking for someone who's looking for us,
Mm-hmm.
um, it means so much to me. And um, to answer your question, I think attachment to God looks like giving permission to lean in to find a God who is not all about judgment or condemnation or right doing, but looking for a God who is looking for you as he
Mm.
created you with calling, with permission to both hurt and permission to grow and repair. Um, and so for me, attachment to God, when I did a class before I went into training for counseling, it was led by a pastoral counselor at a church. Um, and when that first year that we did was identity in God, and the second year was who is God in pain. I feel like I could have
Mm.
spent 5 years on identity in God,
Mm.
and right sizing what identity is and that our doing comes out of that. And I think for me, that's where a deeper level of attachment to God began. I would have described that as that class is where if you're to strip everything off, like all clothing that hides you, like everything that covers your flaws, and you could be outside, for me to be by a tree, like that is just like waving and could put your hands in the air and say, this is me, nothing hidden. And then you could envision like the God of the universe that is both big enough to see all, but also small enough to see you. And
Yeah.
that his hands are both holding you and holding all. It's permission to say, this is me, and I am going to linger in your love and your grace, whether that's in
Mm.
adventure, whether that's in beauty, whether that's in reading and, stimulating that way. But those are the things I think to me that build the attachment. It's a posture
Mm-hmm.
of this is who I am, and I'm going to take that open-handed and receive.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so much of what you said there of like in a lot of our human relationships, we can say this is me while also showing only the parts of me that we think are going to be pleasing or acceptable. And so that sense of this is me, all of it, all of the humanity, all of the
Yes.
mess, and finding yourself deeply and fully loved in the midst of that
Yeah.
by the God who sees it all. Yeah.
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 And in that is grief, right? Like there's joy and there's grief. And so I think for me, the more I can do that, the more it even impacts as I sit with people,
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, what's interesting is when I first went into this profession, I still wanted to be there for people in the right way. I was very confused about, honestly, I think I thought my job was healer.
Mm.
Um, and in that role, I was also very afraid of what I'd come up against. Would I be able to handle it? And of course, in attachment with God and in right sizing who God is and who I am, like, man, Jesus is healer and he is over time and timing, and I am along for the ride. Um, and so then I nerd out on trauma and nerd out on how it's held in our bodies and
Mm-hmm.
nerd out on the safety, that people are craving, the ways they crave to feel seen, but also are afraid to be seen. Um, and yeah, I'd say that has been an interesting place for me to sit in the mess that you can hold between yourself and someone else. Um, and whether the person before me knows it, in my mind, I'm like, where is God in this? you know,
Mm-hmm.
and how he's already showing up. How is he going to continue to reveal himself in this? It's been really beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful piece.
Yeah, that makes me think of, we use, in attachment, and I'm sure you've come, you know this too, but that attunement, like, right? The
Yes.
attunement of the attuned caregiver who can feel the child and know sort of what the child is experiencing, and then can also like respond in a way that is going to be helpful. And so that attunement that God offers, of just, yeah, and I love the way that, um, John and Sung Shim Lapnow and Jim Wilder and Anna Kang wrote this, joyful journey book about Emmanuel journaling and actually walking through the prompts of I see you, God saying to
Yes.
us, I see you, I hear you, I understand what this is for you. I'm glad to be with you, and I'm doing something here. And so
Yes.
that's what I hear you saying too, is that whether the people you're working with know it or not, you're sensing God's attunement to them in their places of
Mhm.
pain.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with
Mm.
some people, it's, as I look at like woundedness, I feel like I'm working with some woundedness and people who do not know the Lord. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a beautiful place, I think, to, in a human size, reflect safety and reflect grace and permission um, to be and to explore. But then for believers or for people who have been in the church, like I feel like we have people who often come to counseling and they're so bold and so into teaching and reminding people who Jesus is and who God is and who he can be for them and his love and his grace for them. And they um, are in the gap of experiencing that love and grace for
Mm.
themselves.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and usually, often, there's some trauma behind that as well. And then I feel like I see people who at one time were in the church, and when the God card is involved, woundedness is so complicated,
Yeah.
uh, and so have walked away or still long for it, but are really leery. And so a lot of the pain and the grief, it's complicated because it's like um, there's a confusion of what was people and what was God, and what do people think of me and what does God think of me? What does my inner critic think of me that's different from what the Holy Spirit thinks of?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just all this big mess. And the beauty of, I mean, I do EMDR, and just love that process of, yeah, because it opens up the body to grieve what has been held.
Mm,
Um, and something that's been so beautiful lately is just seeing people come to, oh my gosh, we need to completely change the target of our EMDR, because what I'm realizing is it's no longer about the people. It is now about God and where
Mm.
was God? And I want to figure that piece out.
mm,
And man, when God's in charge of that, and that's the question right there, um, and being able to sift through that and for people to be able to see the images of a God who is there amidst pain, who comes in to interrupt it, who comes
yes.
in to promise presence, to come in to help you feel seen. Um,
Right.
oh, it's just been beautiful work.
Yeah. I could go off on so many yeah, we could tell stories all day long about that. So Jeff, I'll let you ask a question because I'm
Well, no,
lost
I,
in.
I think you guys should, because I think, like we also have interviewed and we've talked with this guy, Carl Lehman. He does EMDR. He does all that stuff too. He's a
Mm,
psychiatrist. He's been doing it for 25, I don't know, 40 years. He's
mm,
right. But his whole thing is like when people connect with the God who is there in the midst of the pain, who is happy to be with you. He's like, that's where I see, this is Carl Lehman speaking, that he's like, that's where I see the fastest and the deepest kind of work. So I don't know if that happens to you, but I'd love for you, Maeve and Sid, who, if you guys could share stories or just talk about like how God shows up. Where was God when? And then God saying, well, I was there. I'm sure you both have these stories. You just got to draw them out of each other.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Well, I know that, I mean, for the sake of confidentiality, I know, some of the people I might tell stories about probably listen here, so I don't want
Yeah,
to tell
sure.
someone else's story, but I mean, even just my own, I mean, there was one experience, and I wrote about this in our book that's forthcoming too, but just when I was 4 years old or 5 years old, I don't remember exactly how old I was, but, my mom she was dating this guy that she, and there was marriage was possibly in the horizon. We were supposed to be on our best behavior at this dinner, and by the time we came home from dinner, I think I'd been trying so hard to behave myself that I don't know, I didn't even end up going to the bathroom all night for some reason, and as soon as we walk into the house, I had to go to the bathroom so badly, and, I just decided I was just gonna stand over a register and just go down the register right through my little red tights, and I just remember
Mm,
in that moment, it was just, everybody became dysregulated because, I mean, now as I can imagine as a parent and as a homeowner thinking of like, "Oh my goodness, this is so bad for our heating and cooling system. This is what's gonna happen here." And, I think the embarrassment and just everything, right? Everybody's activated. Nobody's in their best place. And I just remember in that moment feeling just so ashamed and so humiliated. And then it turned into sort of like a family joke that they didn't realize what was happening to me every time they told it. Because, I mean, apart from the person who experienced the humiliation, and it is a funny story, but for me, it wasn't funny. And I didn't even know how to communicate to my family, like, how humiliated I was. And so one of the first encounters I had with Jesus in a tangible way, it's not even like I thought of this on a regular ongoing basis or thought about how much impact it had on me. But then in this encounter, this is sort of what he brought up. Like, this is the sort of the memory that came to my mind, and in that memory, Jesus was able to look at me and to be with me, and he wasn't the least bit ruffled by any of this. Like, he wasn't upset, he wasn't irritated, he wasn't annoyed, he wasn't even surprised. And just his calmness and his presence with me, and I just remember, like, And I know this is not me because I would have never, ever made this turn. But he just looked at me and he just said, "What a clever choice." Like, I knew I shouldn't go on the carpet, and I knew, so, I mean, what a clever choice, which just radically transformed the way that I experienced that memory.
Mm.
And I didn't even realize how much it impacted me, but, like, from that moment forward, there were just small shifts I started to see where I just was speaking to myself a little bit differently. There was a lot less shame and "How could you be so stupid?" kind of feelings within me, and it was more like, "Oh, it makes sense," right? Like, and that's what you were talking about earlier with those survival strategies, like, they make sense in the moment that we pull them forward. And when they
Yes.
come up, they make sense and we need them. Now I didn't actually need to go in the register, right? I could have done other things. But in that moment, that was the best resource I had available to me. And Jesus knew that. And he was able to narrate that for me in a different way, which then made this huge impact on the way that I see myself. And just sort of slow shifts in my subconscious and my implicit memory just started to show up in ways where I was like, normally I would have gotten really upset with myself in this moment. And I'm not getting mad at myself right now. And the only thing I can point to is this encounter with Jesus that might have made that difference. And just starting to see the sort of multiplying effect of just that one story, and I could tell, like, 30 others, but just that one story and it's so impactful to me because it was sort of the first one that felt like, "Oh, wow, the difference that it makes when Jesus is there
Yeah.
revealing his heart rather than, carrying the memory in the way I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure I've interpreted it over the years." It's like it's probably even more extreme than it actually was just in the way that I was holding it, so
Oh, I mean, yeah. And what an image of a kid who is holding everything
yeah.
and it and the
Mm-hmm.
reality even within your own bodily fluid that needs to come out
Yeah.
and and an encounter with God who says, "Clever choice because it has to come out."
Yeah, and
You are not
it
to
looks like a drain.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah, and you did what you needed to do. Yeah, and now that that's been emptied, and now that we can validate, and then it's like there's room for more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, and now I think it's a funny story, right? Now I can see the humor in it.
can laugh at it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah, it's powerful, and even just, I think imagery, not everybody thinks in imagery, what I'm seeing for people, the worst part, for me in my life, and then as I sit with people and they talk about what's the worst part of it, and then I'm like, "Okay, and then if that would have happened, then what?" And if that would have
Mm-hmm.
happened, then what? And what we come to is then I would be alone, you
Yeah.
know? Then I would be with all of this and alone, or then I would be with all of this and I would be abandoned. And I mean, that's what's behind our attachment strategies too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mhm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then what? I don't care whether you're anxious, ambivalent, or if you are anxious, avoidant. At the end of the day, the worst is that I will be alone.
Yeah.
And so what I'm finding in this work too is just the images that I believe the Lord is giving to bring restoration
Mhm.
is often like there's been a theme with many of just and sometimes just a bubble, that there is a bubble of protection that might be invisible to others but like sensed in themselves.
Yeah.
And what's in that bubble and what it and the words of truth and strength that are there. Um, and then others just, see this really huge pair of hands that's
Mm-hmm.
holding them and their situation that has not, maybe didn't change. Like we can't change what happened, but we can change the reality that perhaps we were not alone and
Yeah.
perhaps we're still not. And if that's what I'm living out of, that looks different than having to armor up because I might be alone.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, just all really, yeah, really
That's
beautiful.
great.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you had said earlier that, when you experience God, um, there's that sense of comfort, but you also use the word strength.
Mhm.
And and sometimes I get it's kind of one of those things where when people talk about secure attachment, um, like just the language goes to, oh, it's like when I'm safe, it's when I'm comfortable and nothing's wrong, which is kind of true. But like secure attachment often also has that other side of like being not just comfortable, but having courage or like the strength to go out. So could you talk about that a little bit? So it's not just about how like I'm safe to be myself, but I'm also strong to be myself in the world. Like I can go out. Does that make sense? I was wondering how you thought about
Completely.
those things.
I've
Yeah.
actually, yeah, I've had to do a lot of work on that. Because by nature and Enneagram or what, I crave comfort, you know?
Mm.
Mm,
Um, and yet also, if you're just only in comfort, you also, it, you're missing out, you know? So for me, I really, Psalm 71, if you look through the Psalms and David, when he's crying out because he is overwhelmed, often use God is my refuge, God is my fortress, God is my rock, God is my deliverer. And sometimes it's like, angstily, like, please be this for me. And sometimes it's like, no, this is who you are. And so I really
mm,
zeroed in on refuge and fortress and wanted to understand what's the difference between those. And for
mm,
me, like when we can understand those, that is that social connected state in our nervous system um, that that will help us feel at home, both in the easy and in the hard.
Mm.
And the more I looked at refuge, it's a place we go to hide. It's a place we go to escape from, to get away from, so that we can right size who God is and who we are, you know? And in that, we can be refueled and strengthened. And sometimes that looks like a lot of comfort and a lot of ice cream, or it looks like a beautiful vacation, or it looks like quiet around you in your home and no other voices. Refuge can look so many different ways. Refuge has become a verb for me. This morning, I'm
mm.
refuging. you
Oh, I
know,
like
I
that.
am I
Yeah.
am refining. I'm refining who God is and who I am for permission to be the right size version of me with God. But then you look at fortress and the Hebrew word for it, there's different versions, but it basically means a place of defense outside of the castle walls is generally where it was in the Old Testament. And that it is built for defense so that you can be strong when the arrows are coming, right?
Mm.
Where the chaos is around you. This is a place of defense, but not for you to hide. It is for you to be. It is for you to be strong. It is for you to do the hard. Um,
Mhm.
and the reality is that whoever God is in refuge and who we are that same when the arrows are coming and we are in fortress living. Um, and that's the beautiful part. It's both warmth and it is let's do the things, as well. And let's go shake it up and
Mm,
let's right size out of the strength of God, not because I'm armoring up in my own stuff.
Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah. I noticed you've said that several times throughout the podcast. So I just want to clarify again. When you say armoring up, you're connecting that to a posture of
Yeah.
like anxiety of this, I have to protect myself, I have to defend myself. Is that how you're using it?
I mean, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think of it as um, I am armoring up is whatever we think we need to do to be okay.
Yeah.
And when we're facing battle, when we're like assuming we're in a battle that is no longer still going on, right?
Mm.
So if I have to people please to be okay, like many people I work with had to appease, had to make sure everybody else was okay around them
Yeah.
so they could be okay, right? And it was a gift, but that's also a way of armoring up in life when that same battle isn't going on, but we just think it is. We don't
Mm.
realize that battle is done. Armoring up can look like always responding with anger and rage or to fight. you know?
Mhm.
And you might have had to at some point, but it's not the same battle we're in. That's just our strategy to get through. That's armoring up. Being perfect, if we had to be perfect growing up, and that was the way to armor up. Then we have a really strong inner critic. And now today as adults, we could armor up with our inner critic, but it's just a way we fought a battle at one point,
Yeah.
and it's no longer the same battle now.
Mm. Yeah, thank you
A-
for clarifying that. Yeah. Sorry, go
As
ahead,
you were
Jeff.
talking, I don't know where that language comes from, right? But as you were talking about, I was thinking of David going to face Goliath and how Saul wanted to give him the
Yeah,
ill-fitting armor,
it
the
was
armor that
so
doesn't fit.
heavy.
It was so heavy, it was big, it was for someone else, it's for a different time, and it wasn't for what now, God was, working in David. And so I have no idea if that's what, but that just jumped into my head. So just throw that out there.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I can tell the story that it comes from with Hiru Unada. Are you familiar with the
Mm,
Japanese Imperial
mhm.
Intelligence Officer, World War II? Um,
I
so
I
Oh, is
think
he
I
the one that
am.
got
Go
lost on the
ahead.
islands?
yeah,
He's the one
so
who
Oh,
continued
yeah.
to fight the war after it was over, right? Yes.
yeah, so he's deployed to the Philippines from Japan. Um, I think it was like 9 months before the war was over, but of course didn't know that, and given 2 commands. Um, and his craft was guerrilla
Yeah.
warfare, but it was no matter what you do, don't stop fighting. So tear down the enemy structures, keep going. And then don't die, don't surrender. They're really the same command, but
Yeah.
under 2 different subsets, no matter what, while the war is going. And so he continues over that. And then when the war is over and it's communicated, can't believe it because I got to keep to my commands, right? I got to
Mhm.
keep fighting. Tracks were flown over, leaflets communicating the
Right.
war is over. Everybody can surrender and go home. But he was too much in his commands
Yeah. Yeah, and
with
it
the
wasn't
war
until his commanding officer actually finally told him that the war was over that he finally quit fighting, right?
29 years after his
Yes.
Wow.
original commanding officer came in. And to me, in my mind, and but I just create this image of the commanding officer coming over, like looking in your eyes and, you know, giving
Yeah.
the salute of honor, saying, "Soldier, you have done your duty. You are
It's
released. You can
yes.
surrender and you can go home."
Oh, and that's so much like what we do with our parts, right? When you're doing these parts of yourselves that have been fighting this battle your whole life, and when they're finally seen and understood, we can say, "Well done. Thank you for your service. You're released." Yeah.
Mm. Well, and I think I'm just thinking through, I mean, that's in a sense a tragic story. Um,
I used it
and,
as a
and
sermon illustration once. As soon as you
what,
started telling it, I was like, "Oh, that came in a sermon once."
no,
Yeah.
we put that in our first book, I'm pretty sure. Um, but, but there is a sense in which, surviving is, in a sense, part of what God has given us, right? God
Mhm.
has designed us to survive. And Jesus, as our good creator, has given us all these tools, but sin does warp them. And so back to the, like, encountering God, or where was God, to have Jesus, come and be with us and say, not shaming, like, all the stuff you did is wrong and sinful. I can't believe you did that, right? But it says, like, you were built to survive and you found ways to survive, but I have more for you now.
Yeah.
I have healing from that, and we can deploy some of those things in different ways, and some of them we'll just give up, and let's keep moving forward. I'm bringing, John 10:10 of the fullness of life. Like, let's get back onto that project of the fullness of life rather than this battle that we've been stuck in. And so having our creator, join us like that commanding officer, and say, hey, let's keep going. Let's go to the next thing, the new thing, the thing that's full of life. That's so powerful.
Oh, so powerful. So powerful.
Mm.
And when I first heard that story, I was like, who in the world does that?
Mm,
And I look at my own life and I'm like, oh no,
I do it. Yeah.
more than 29 years, right? I've
Yeah.
been assuming some battles that are no longer there, you know? And there is an invitation to release those things
Mm,
and to hold on to the one who holds it all,
mm.
and yes, as you say, the commanding officer. But
So
yeah,
I didn't ask Sid if I could share this, but Sid and I are both younger siblings, and so we have that kind of like have that sense of older siblings picking on us and all that stuff, right? And just before we got on this podcast, we kind of had an interaction where I think both of us were doing that to each other. And I just kind of casually was like, "Are you ready for the podcast with Lisa?" And then, the two of us just went, like,
I'm like, I'm
"What? You don't?"
always ready. When have I ever been late?
We both just kind of got a little offended, right? We armored up with this, like, our siblings and parents just expect nothing of us, but I can do it. I'm a big boy now, and I'm a big girl now. And like, I think
I
we
don't
just
need
had
to
this,
be managed.
yeah, we had this Friday afternoon kind of like, situation. So anyways, yeah, we keep doing that,
keep
but can
doing
we,
it.
yeah. Oh, wow. Well, this has
Yeah.
been a delight. I'm like, we could keep talking and talking. I feel like, gosh.
Yeah.
So this has been a lot of fun. Sid, I don't know if you have any last thoughts or questions
No,
or how to
I
land the
guess
plane, but
for, so for listeners, let's say, like like maybe someone is listening to themselves for the first time or hearing some of these stories and going, man, I didn't even realize how armored up I am or how I'm still fighting battles. What would you want someone like that to hear?
Oh man. First of all, I think that it's not surprising that it's something that probably unites us as humans.
Mm,
And so, first of all, I'd want them to hear, you are not alone. That's my
yeah.
story. It sounds like that's
My
your
story.
stories, right? And so, everybody who does that, may we raise our hands.
Mm,
Um, and it's also not surprising to God,
mm,
that He created us so that we can do these things when we need to. And that also, it's not where we have to stay,
yeah.
hmm.
that we can honor what was, and we can also realize that there's an invitation that we can live strong, but we don't have to be armored up. And
Mm,
an invitation into letting our armor down. And oftentimes, I think that happens more in reflection than it does in the minute, you know?
yeah.
Uh, that oftentimes we can hear release your armor and think, oh my gosh, I have to do it right now. And what does
And
that
that
look
just
like?
makes me want to armor up even more. I can't
I
let it
know,
go.
that's scary. Yeah. And that it's a slow process, and you have a God who knows that. And people, I think, who will see you or want to see you know that too. So there's permission and a call.
Mm,
And even if it starts with um, a thought of, God, I want to begin to trust you enough to even let go my armor or let down one piece of armor. And would you help me even see what that armor feels like,
yeah.
or what that armor, a hint at what it might be? That's enough. Even that is leaning in, and it's a start.
Mm, yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, where can people find you or the things you're doing with Capable Life or other stuff?
Yeah, so we're on life at capablelife.com. That's the organization that Steve and I are both involved in together, which is all about managing anxiety in the workplace and the home place and fostering connection within ourselves, with others, and with God. And then in my counseling, I'm at Pathways Counseling. So if you look up Lisa Cuss at Pathways Counseling, you'll be able to find my website. It's a little bit more about me and what I do. Those are the main places. I'm not all over social media.
Yeah.
You probably have a very calm and fulfilling life then. Uh, any secret projects that you could preview, or you and Steve gonna write something together, or you're like, no, I'm not. You sound like a mystic. Like I'm like, you probably have all these things
Oh
you're
my
working
gosh,
on.
I have
I
a
don't
lot of
know.
ideas that are brewing. We're wanting to do some things with just mental health and what is the church's role. What are things the
Mm,
church would be helpful for the church to know? What can the
Mhm.
church do that's different from professionals? What can professionals do? And just bring some layman's terms and some clear tangibles with it. Um, So that's something we have in mind. And then, yeah, we have all kinds of other ideas. We'll see as they go.
So many ideas, so little time. We
Yeah.
know exactly
Yep.
how that is.
Can resonate with that.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I would love to figure out how to do this again, and we would love to, especially on that last project, partner with what you and Steve are doing, because that's
Yeah.
definitely our hope is bringing attachment before the church, especially to help pastors and churches kind of grow in their secure attachment, so people's mental health, as well as we can raise people's mental and spiritual health and maybe reduce the church hurt that is often kind
Yeah.
of happening these days. And so, well,
Yeah.
thank you again so much.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks so
Lisa.
much. Yeah, I've enjoyed. I've loved being in on the conversation. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.